Good evening, everyone. I want to welcome you on behalf of the Social Science Department and GRCC to our annual Race, Ethnicity, and Identity Conference. Every year, the department that I'm in, and my name's Mike Light, by the way, I'm the chair of the Social Science Department here at Grand Rapids Community College, and I teach U.S. history. Every year, our department tries to take on topics and issues that deal with what it means to be human. And this year, we've focused quite a bit on the issue of Africa and what it means to be African in the modern world, and issues of race. So we have a 2-week conference. Tonight is the kickoff event to that conference. I'm going to talk a little bit about that in just a second, but I want to give you a sense of what's coming up for the next 2 weeks. Our keynote speaker is going to be speaking Wednesday night at Fountain Street Church. We co-sponsor this event with the Diversity Lecture Series, and it's Michelle Norris from NPR, and she's going to be talking about a project that she's been working on called America's Conversation on Race. So if you are free and available, it's from 7 to 9 p.m. at Fountain Street Church on Wednesday, March 12th. Next week, we have a couple of speakers that are speaking about African issues, both of them academic experts. One of them is Dr. Caroline Faria, and her talk will be Styling a Nation, Fear and Desire in the South Sudanese Beauty Trade. She'll be speaking Tuesday night, March 18th, in this room from 6:30 to 8. And then on Wednesday, March 19th, Dr. Alicia Decker will be talking about the legacy of Amin, ethnicity, gender, and religion in the shaping of memory in Uganda. We have many other events. If you're interested, you can check out our website. You can go to grcc.edu and click on the Social Science Department link and check out the whole roster of events. Tonight's guests are personally exciting to me. I think this sounds fantastic. We've never done anything quite like this before. We have a story about what it means to be human in the Congo, and it comes in 3 parts. We have someone who's going to speak about the actual experiences of the people in the Congo and what they faced over the last few years. An artist, this beautiful artwork that you see around you here today, which you can certainly take some time as you're on your way out to look at. And then some music for you, some singing at the end. A little bit about our speakers tonight. The first person you're going to hear from is Kizombo Kalumbula. He's a native of the Democratic Republic of Congo, and he's the co-founder and co-pastor of the Tabernacle Community Church here in Grand Rapids. He's also the executive director of the International Berrien Ministries, which is headquartered in Grand Rapids, and he leads yearly mission trips to the Democratic Republic of Congo to work on community development projects. Pastor Kizombo is a PhD candidate in health psychology from North Central University, and he has actually been, in the past, one of the many things that he's done, an adjunct professor here at Grand Rapids Community College in the psychology department. So he will start off the evening's events. The wonderful artwork that you see is the creation and imagination of Pamela Alderman. She's a wife, mother of 4, watercolor artist, writer. Her artwork was actually voted into the top 100 at Art Prize in 2012 and won first place at Women's Work International Exhibition in the Chicago area. Pretty cool stuff there. In 2011, she started working with a group of Congolese women and children living in West Michigan. And those friendships, she said, have enlarged her heart, and her work, Courage Ablaze, depicts Congolese women and children overcoming tremendous suffering with the spirit of true courage. The musical performance tonight is by a group, a family of 8 children that call themselves Le Clay. And they moved to West Michigan in 2011, and I think this is wonderful as well. They dedicate their voices to shedding light on the Congolese Holocaust and the great suffering of these people, but also to express their deep faith. So if you'd help me in welcoming our speakers, we'll start off with Pastor Kizombo.
Hello, everybody. Actually, you can talk back to me. Hi, everybody. Yes, we are excited to be here this evening. We thank God for the privilege to participate in this awesome 2 weeks and to begin it that the Grand Rapids Community College has put together to deal with issues of race, ethnicity, and identity. I would like to begin this evening by just expressing our thanksgiving. And as Congolese by birth and nurture, there are several Congolese who live here in West Michigan. So on their behalf, I am extending a heartfelt gratitude to the Grand Rapids Community College for putting on this event. But more so, also, I would like to thank the Grand Rapids Community College for acknowledging, to some degree, the 8 million people that have lost their lives in the Democratic Republic of Congo. I would like to begin with a question. And this question, if you know the answer to it, please respond. How many of us, without looking at my chart, how many of us could be able to locate the Democratic Republic of Congo on a continent of Africa by show of hands? Well, that's very good. Better than I thought when I first came. Now, how many of us can locate the Republic of Rwanda? All right. We can locate the Republic of Rwanda. Now, these two countries, the Democratic Republic of Congo and Rwanda, are linked geographically in the continent of Africa. Most borders in African countries are very porous. Countries are separated by either a river or a lake, and this is in the case of Rwanda and the Congo. They're separated by a lake and a river. And movement of people from one country to the next is very fluid. People move back and forth very fluidly. Now, in 1994, if you may recall, there was a genocide that took place in Rwanda, killing approximately 800,000 to 1 million people in a span of 3 months. During this time, over 2 million individuals fled Rwanda and went into Congo. And they crossed the borders. They went primarily in the city of Bukavu and the city of Goma. Now, Bukavu is where I was born. And when they went there, 2 million people, imagine, in a span of 3 months, they all pour into an area. When they went there, they began to create makeshift camps because there was no place to stay. And as they create these makeshift camps, they cut down trees so that they can be able to have firewood, both for cooking as well as for staying warm during the night. The city of Bukavu, to my recollection, when I grew up in it, was lush green, very beautiful place, surrounded by the lake and tundra trees, just beautiful place. Eucalyptus trees, just very green. But when the 2 million people filled the place, they cut down trees for wood, the place became desolate. It became like a desert, creating a great ecological disaster. Now, among the people that fled into Congo were some of the militiamen who committed the genocide in Rwanda. Later, the government of Rwanda pursued them into Congo, indiscriminately killing men, women, children, young, old, who were in these camps, while the world stood by silent. Those who were able, amongst the people in the camp, those who were able to flee, they fled into the jungles, even further into Congo. In 1996, there came a rebellion that was primarily sponsored by Rwanda and Uganda to oust the then president of Congo by the name of Mobutu Sese Seko. The rebellion was very fierce. It unrolled anybody who could move, anybody who could carry anything, children included. It didn't take very long. In a span of 2 months, they marched from further east of Congo all the way west to the capital, and Mobutu was out of power. When the rebellion came, it unleashed on the Congolese people and the nation of Congo a tragedy never seen anywhere else in the world. In fact, it was termed as the World War of Africa, or the Third World War. When all this was going on, we here in the United States and other part of the world pay no attention. Why? Because out of sight, out of mind. How many of us know that there is an internal war going on in Congo even right now? Even right now as we stand in this room, there is a war going on in Congo. According to CNN reports in 2012, they reported that the war in Congo has claimed the same number of people that died on 9/11 every single day for 360 days. Just imagine that. Every single day, 9/11 is happening for 360 days. Has claimed the same number of people that died in the genocide of Rwanda, the 800,000 to 1 million people. Has claimed the number of people that died during the Bosnian conflicts and ethnic cleansing that took place in the mid-1990s. The same number of people that have died in the genocide that has taken place in Darfur in Sudan. The same number of people that were killed in a great tsunami that struck Asia in 2004. And the number of people who died in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. All those numbers combined and doubled, that's the number of people that have died in the war that's going on in Congo. This will be like filling the big house at the University of Michigan, the football stadium, filling with 80,000 people, 100 times across the cities in the United States. Now, these numbers are astronomical. They are jaw-astonishingly numbers. You hear them, you can't help but get overwhelmed. And yet, most Americans have never heard of them. So I ask myself the question, why? Why haven't we in the United States? Why haven't we heard of the war that's going on in Congo? In the age of Twitter, in the age of Facebook, in the age of CNN 24/7. This hidden war in the Congo, the war that the world has forgotten, being fought there today, according to the United Nations report, actually the International Rescue Committee report and the United Nations affirmed their report, it has claimed nearly over 8 million lives. That's not all. By the end of 2012, an additional 1 million Congolese folks had been driven from their homes and forced to seek shelters in with desperately poor relatives in makeshift local camps where entire families lived in hovels built of sticks and tarps. Nearly 500,000 more Congolese sought asylum in neighboring countries. Now, because we have not heard of this, what I'm going to mention here may not really make much sense to you. There was a group called the M23 who ran a murderous campaigns to occupy Congo's eastern mineral-rich provinces of North and South Kivu and have left 200,000 people in terrible conditions, killed countless number of people, and brought further humanitarian crisis into the region. Most of the displaced people were substantive farmers who fed their families from the produce of Congo's rich soil. Now, they were running for their lives. And everything they had, they left behind. Homes, crops, schools, churches were destroyed by these ruthless rebels. Fear and intimidation breed hopelessness. Desperate families flee in Congo. Now, as they came through, they use the unspeakable weapon, despicable and unspeakable weapon of rape as a weapon of war. Rebels in Congo, the fighters, rebels in Congo would say it's cheaper to rape a woman than to waste a bullet. Women in Eastern Congo don't talk about if they will be raped, but when. This is the tragic story of 1,152 women who are raped every day in the Democratic Republic of Congo, according to the American Journal of Public Health. The United Nations has labeled Congo the rape capital of the world. The third largest country on the continent of Africa has been labeled the rape capital of the world because of the pace and the relentless and systematic use of rape as a weapon of war by these proxy militia gangs fighting primarily for the control of the easily accessible and highly sought after natural resources that are destined for sales in Europe, in Asia, in Canada, and in these United States where we live. So I asked myself a question: is there hope for the people of Congo? Is there hope for the people of the Democratic Republic of Congo? And I answered that question by saying, yes, there is hope. However, hope is met with many, many obstacles, real obstacles. And chief amongst them is lack of justice. Lack of justice, impunity of the crime perpetrator. Unlike here in Grand Rapids where we live. Here in Grand Rapids where we live, if someone were to break into your home, what would you do? Yeah, you call the cops. That's just instinct and natural. You call the cops. And the cops will come to your home and investigate what has happened. And probably even apprehend the perpetrator. Oh, it's not the same in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Because the same very cop that you may be calling may end up victimizing you the second time. So people are left for themselves. Lack of justice. Lack of justice is chief amongst the barrier to hope for the people of Congo. There was another obstacle. Another obstacle is relentless and restless systematic rape that is destroying the fabric of the family in Congo. Coward criminals have subjected women, mothers, daughters, sisters, and wives to this inhumane treatment. And many of these victims are infected with the HIV virus and do not even know it. And the infection for them has become a death sentence. So I ask myself a question. Is there hope for the people of Congo? Is there hope for the Congolese people? But I came back and answered that question. Yes, there is hope. Why is there hope? Because of the universal neighborhood of man. That's why there is hope. Because we are our neighbor's keepers. We are expected to treat people as we would like to be treated. You know, there is a story in the Gospel of Luke that Jesus told about the story of the Good Samaritan. Jesus told the story of the man who went down to Jericho but fell amongst thieves. He was beaten, he was robbed, and was left for dead. Now, as the religious leaders had come by, and they passed him. Until a Samaritan who felt sorry for him, cared for his wounds, and even took him to an inn, paid for his medical bills, and promised to pay for the rest of the bills when he returns. Now, why did Jesus tell this story? He told this story because he was asked this question: who is my neighbor? Who is my neighbor? That's a question he was asked. In essence, this question is equivalent of a question that we may ask ourselves today. Why should we care about what's going on in the Congo? Why should we care here in Grand Rapids? Why should we care about what's going on in Congo? Here's the answer. We should care because we are our neighbor's keeper. We should care because of the universal neighborhood of man. People in Congo are our neighbors. Yes, they may be far away in a different continent than where we are, but they are our neighbor. This is why Jesus told the story of the Good Samaritan. Because the man who fell in the hands of the thieves and the Samaritan were now from the same ethnic group. But this man, the Good Samaritan, chose to kneel down, pick up the beaten man, bandage his wounds, and take him to an inn. In the same way today, every human being is your neighbor. We are to love every human being as much as we love ourselves. We are to be the agent of hope to a hopeless world. How do we do this? We do this by engaging in a message of hope. If we carry the message of hope to the world, we'll be fulfilling one of the purposes for which you and I were made. Now, there are many entry points where we can engage in facilitating this message of hope to the Congolese people. And one of those entry points I'll highlight to you tonight is a ministry called International Berean Ministry that I just happen to be leading it. And every summer, when Mike was speaking out here, he mentioned us sharing classrooms from 2005 to 2010. But I had to pull away for some of the obligations because my heart was drawn so heavily following what was going on in Congo, to where I began to dedicate my time and my life to say, I need to bring the message of hope. So through International Berean Ministries, we educate people in Congo. We educate young and old in skills that will provide them with a means to support their family. We educate in skills such as farming, carpentry, entrepreneurship, because we desire to enable people in Congo to become self-sufficient as they learn these vital life skills. We are also training and equipping people to be able to resolve conflict, because with these multiple wars and multiple fighting that have been going on, people no longer trust one another. So we train them in conflict resolution. We desire to instill a healthy pride in the Congolese people, especially the women of Congo, who have bear the greatest brunt of what has gone on since 1996 to today. So before I take my seat, I invite you to stand with us. Together we must stand for human flourishing. Together we must stand against injustice in our world. In fact, I recall the words of Dr. King writing from the jail of Birmingham when he said this. He said, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Together, I invite you to stand with us as we enable those who are less able. The world that was out of sight is now revealed to you. You can see it portrayed through the artworks that surround us in this room. The people that have suffered from that war now filled our churches here in Grand Rapids. They fill our neighborhoods here in Grand Rapids. They fill our city. They are here in our state. And some are students here in this very college where we are speaking tonight. My friends, out of sight, out of mind is no longer hidden. It is revealed. And I believe our words will go with you, because now you know what you did not know prior to coming here tonight. Before I take my seat, I would like to ask you if you would join me in welcoming Pamela, Alderman, a friend of mine, but not only so, but a friend of the Congolese people. As she comes up here and shares with us Courage Ablaze, share with us the passion that God has revealed to her to give her the voice to speak for the voiceless. So if you would, please, put your hands together and let's welcome, with a very warm hand clap, Pamela Alderman, as she comes to share with us Courage Ablaze. May God bless you and may God keep you.
Thank you, Kizombo. Good evening, GRCC. Thank you for coming out. And thank you to Mike Light and to Professor Ennis Young to make it possible for Courage Ablaze to be here at GRCC. And thank you to Kizombo and our other Congolese friends for their bravery and their example to us. You know, they live here in West Michigan and it's very safe, but they leave this safe place and they continue to travel back to Congo to help others. And I think that's an amazing example of courage. Sabina, 40, remembers. In eastern Congo, we heard shootings of rifles and some great detonations. Then the quiet was felt. We saw emerging soldiers armed and entering our home where we were, my husband and I. Our 5 daughters were in their rooms. There was a great detonation inside the house, and we lay down on the floor as they asked us. When our girls heard the voice of their dad beg the soldiers to leave, they started to shout. 4 soldiers moved towards the room of our girls. I heard the blows and cries of our daughters. They shouted very extremely. I could not move. A soldier killed my husband. My husband died without any rescue by the hand of his enemy who was unknown, while our daughters were raped. I cried, but God alone knows if I was heard. Josephine, 26, remembers. My husband and I heard a man knock on the door. The door was largely open. Soldiers were emerging inside the house. We made a loud noise and asked rescue to anyone who could hear us. I started to cry. My husband cried too. Before they wanted to leave, the commander had already torn my clothes. That night, because I'm a woman who is now known by several men, I lost my husband too. Many do not want to associate with me anymore because I do not smell well. And I do not know how to join together a little bit of money to request a surgical operation. I must forget and forgive my tortures and look to the future in front of me. Fieda, 10, remembers. I was born in Congo. My family counts 9 children. I am the 8th one, and I do not like to study. It was on a Tuesday when Mom had gone to the market. A man found me alone. First, he removed my clothes. Then he lay down on top of me. It was around 4 p.m. I shouted a lot, but no one came. Some of the stories are a composite of stories and have been shared in the news or reports, while others are original stories. The names and some of the details have been changed to protect identities. My definition of being a woman who cares about her world began to change in 2011 when my life collided with some Congolese refugees at a West Michigan event. At the time, I knew nothing about Congo, except that it was a country located somewhere in the continent of Africa. At the time, it took me 5 minutes to find Congo on this huge map that was in my garage. I was talking on the telephone to my girlfriend who lived at the time in the Middle East, and she was looking at a map in her home, and I was looking on this map in my garage, and yet we were 2 educated American women, and we were struggling to find Congo. My friend had lived in Europe and in the Middle East, and I had lived in Asia and in Europe, and yet, so we were well traveled, and yet we didn't know where Congo was. And I find that this is the experience of many Americans, as Kizombo was trying to point out as well. So I'm glad he brought his map. Well, so I began over the next year to study the plight of the Congolese people and to work with these local refugees. These friendships led me on a path into the heart of Africa, a place I have since learned is unsafe to be a woman. After watching numerous documentaries on Congo, my research left me heartbroken. My husband would come home from work after I'd been watching these documentaries, and he'd find me crying. A couple nights later, he'd come home from work again after I'd been watching more documentaries, and he'd find me crying again. Finally, he said, "Pamela, stop watching these documentaries on Congo." But I couldn't stop. I was horrified by what I was learning. Rebel soldiers trek from village to village, raping and mutilating the women. They use sticks, broken bottles, guns, and bayonets to deliberately destroy the female sex organs, causing holes called fistulas between the bladder and the rectum and the uterus. Yeah, I read Josephine's story, and the reason she didn't smell well is because after the violent rape, her bladder was now like a sieve, and it leaked urine. And the little 10-year-old, well, after the violent rape, she was left with a fistula as well. The 2 million women of Congo, Congo's silent heroes, these women have suffered barbaric cruelty and rape. The goal of sexual violence is simple: shame the women, break the men, and destroy a nation. Why? Well, one of the reasons is because of the vast natural resources of Congo, such as gold and coltan and diamonds. Unfortunately for the women and children, Congo's true treasures, well, they are caught in this crossfire between war and greed and ethnic hatred. Though the troubles of Congo seem so far away, we in the West still benefit greatly by Congo's natural resources. Congo is one of the world's greatest producers of diamonds. Yeah, I think in the West, don't we say diamonds are a girl's best friend? But in Congo, a lot of people are suffering because of these diamonds. Congo is also a great producer of coltan. And coltan is found in our laptops and in our cell phones. Perhaps Congolese coltan is in your cell phone and in my cell phone. So, like Kizombo said, 8 million people slaughtered. Well, after learning about the suffering of the Congolese people, such as Josephine and Fieta and Sabina, I created this healing environment called Courage Ablaze through my art. The title comes from after spending time with the Congolese people and listening to their intense stories of suffering. Amazingly, as I spent time with these women, I saw that they weren't falling apart. They still sing, and they don't just sing, they sing. And I began to ask myself, well, what if this had been me? What if I had been raped, or my husband had been murdered, or my children had been lost during the war? Would I still sing? Well, Courage Ablaze consists of the 3 7-foot pillars with the images of the women on the front, and their stories are portrayed on the back. And these portraits of courage depict the intense and fierce determination of these women and children. The 8-foot copper tree called the flame tree, there's really a tree in Africa called the flame tree. And it, with the charred frames, it depicts these courageous survivors. Actually, the small pillars depict these courageous survivors. And the charred frames, they represent the 8 million slaughtered in Congo's Holocaust. Well, these valiant survivors, they are rising up out of the ashes. Their enemies couldn't destroy their tenacious spirits, and they are rebuilding their lives for their families and for their nation. Well, during Art Prize, when Courage Ablaze was first showcased, the overwhelming response from visitors was tears. Hundreds left their email addresses or notes in my gallery notebook. After Art Prize, Courage Ablaze was again featured at Women's Expo at DeVos Place. And there I overheard one of the visitors say, "Oh, this is that Art Prize exhibit where everyone was crying." Though the stories of these women from Congo are from a half a world away, it was interesting that women at Art Prize and at Women's Expo, they started to share their rape stories. And I learned something during that time, that art helps soul healing from any culture. Well, in closing, I'd like to introduce you to my friend I'll call Jetta. Jetta and her children fled into Uganda as gunfire broke out near their home in Congo. Trying to save the lives of her children, Jetta was instantly separated from her husband. At the time, she didn't know if he had lived or if he had died. But while fleeing, Jetta encountered soldiers raping the women. So Jetta took a detour. She went to the commander's office to deliver this message: tell your soldiers to stop raping the women. Jetta's story is an amazing story of courage. In the midst of war and chaos, she takes a detour because she cared about others, innocent women and children. Well, after colliding with Jetta, I had to ask myself this question: Pamela, what would you do? Would you risk your own personal safety to help others in need? Well, listen to these ancient sacred words. Speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves. Ensure justice for those being crushed. Jetta spoke up. So what about you and what about me? Is there one small step that we could take to help the people of Congo? To help one person in Congo, or to help one refugee living here in West Michigan? About 20,000 Congolese people live here in West Michigan. Well, I would like to invite you to take out your pink action sheet. On this sheet, we have examples of what you might be able to do. I know Kizombo mentioned a couple things. I'd like to also highlight a couple things. You know, the students here, are the generation of texting and tweeting. And so students have within their power to help get stories out. And so I would encourage people to tell your friends, get this story out. Utilize the social media. You could also donate to International Berean Ministry that Kizombo heads up, or the other ministry is Congo International Ministries. And both of these ministries do much needed work in Congo. This summer, Kizombo is going to lead a missions trip into Congo to help build clean water systems. So if your courage has been set ablaze, that's an idea. You could join him this summer. And someone recently pointed out there at the bottom that you can go to sign an electronic petition confronting genocide in Congo as well as other parts of the world. I signed that this week. So I would encourage you, maybe choose one thing to leave here tonight and determine in your heart to do one thing to help the people of Congo. Well, Sabina and Josephine and Fieda, they have suffered murder, rape, genocide. But their enemies couldn't destroy their courageous spirits. The atrocities inflicted upon them have only strengthened the flames of bravery in their hearts. And these flames have burst into a roaring fire, their courage ablaze. Thank you.
We are going to open this time to try to answer some questions that you may have as a result of hearing the words we just have shared with you. And Professor Mike is going to help us with a microphone in a crowd. If you have a question, just raise your hand where you are, and the mic will reach you, and we'll try to respond. There is always the courageous first, right here.
If you wait just 1 second for the microphone, that way we can get it on camera. Thanks.
Okay, you said you're from the Congo, the Republic of Congo, and the city or the town that you grew up in was the one that everybody was fleeing to? The one that all the trees were cut down? What was the name of that again?
I said I am from Bukavu, and Bukavu is a city in the border of Rwanda and Congo. Now, just to clarify, it's not the Republic of Congo, because there are two Congos that are next to each other. I am from the Democratic Republic of Congo, which are the two countries actually in the world that has the capital city that are very close proximity to one another, just separated by the river, and that is the River Congo. So yes, I am originally from Bukavu. That's where I was raised.
And when did you move to America?
I came to the United States in 1989, right here in Grand Rapids, and I've lived here since then.
I just want to ask a question that so they're doing this to each other, like people of the same color are doing this to each other, like they're going around and raping the women and the little girls. You understand what I'm saying? Like they're doing this to each other. Like they're not. Are they like picking out different people from different countries inside of Africa or inside of Congo? Or are they just, doing this to their own people?
That's a very good question. And I heard in your question you asked people of the same color. And because this conference is about race, ethnicity, and identity, that is a very good question. Yes, most of the people in Congo are of dark-skinned people, African people, and yes, these are people from the same group. Now, being from the same group still does not exclude them from having a dark heart that create atrocities like the ones that are going on. What is behind what's going on is greed, and that greed is for the natural resources. So there are multi-international corporations that are sponsoring some of these militia fighters who are going in for the purpose of getting the minerals out free of taxes and through those not clean ways.
If I may just add, there's also raping in between groups. Like if a Congolese person marries a person from Rwanda, then the children they consider a mix, and that causes racial tension as well. And so some of the raping comes from those examples.
You said the militias are funded by multinational corporations. Did you say that? Did I hear that right?
Yes, you heard that right.
And do we know what corporations these are, and are they being punished for this kind of stuff?
We do not know for sure because it's like an underground market. But we know that the minerals that are being extracted from the soil in Congo are being used to produce things like Pamela referred to, the cell phones that we have, the computers that we have. So we know the minerals is getting to the market somewhere. But the mafia that is orchestrating all of this, nobody really has put a finger on it. We also know that they don't make weapons in Congo, and yet fire weapons are being used in Congo. So somebody's manufacturing those weapons somewhere, and somehow they're making their way to Congo. By the way, if I may just add to that as we're waiting for the next question, that's a very good reason for us to utilize some of the call to action where we need to alert our government officials to actually be able to become our neighbor's keeper. We have one of the premier government country in the world where if we put our will to bringing about justice, we can. So if we were to tweet, and I don't know if on action sheet there is some representative who are listed there, communicate to their offices so that the State Department can actually do something about this. And I believe something can be done. Yes, there was a question in the back.
Yes, what did you say the purpose of the mutilation of the women and children was?
Yeah, well, I talked about how they shame the women and break the men and then just destroy the nation. I know Kizombo also mentioned that it just destroys the fabric of the family, and it's just the breakdown of the family. The people are so demoralized that then they don't fight back. They just give up. And so many of them die. I mean, when they get these fistulas, they may bleed to death. They may not get medical care in time. And so, you know, it just destroys the heart of the people.
You said that you watched documentaries on this. How many documentaries is there for this?
Oh, well, there's a lot.
Yeah, many things have been produced, but they are on the internet. So if you were to go tonight and be able to Google or go on YouTube. In fact, prior to my coming here tonight, I was watching one very short story that says, why should we give a damn about Congo? And it challenges where it's right in your face, talking about why should we pay attention here in the United States about what's going on in Congo. And it was produced by International Rescue Committee after they have done the research to discover in 2008, 5.6 million people had been killed, some from lack of basic necessities that we get here when you have developed illnesses such as malaria, diarrhea, cholera. People are dying because they do not have access to sanitation and health care.
I also Googled war in Congo, rape of women of Congo, and I watched a lot of BBC documentaries. There's just so many out there and some really excellent material.
Sorry. In one of your stories you was talking about, you said that like after the woman was raped, the husband like left or something like that.
Yeah.
Does that like always happen often? Like the husband just leave once?
Right. I tried to give different examples of like all the children in the household being raped, or example of a young woman, a married woman being raped, or a young child being raped. In the case of the married women, it's really hard to understand, but they are so afraid of contracting AIDS in Africa that once this wife has been raped, the husband just leaves in many cases because he does not want to get AIDS. So it's a very strong, the people of Africa are very afraid of AIDS. So the woman, she's raped, but now she lost her husband too. She loses everything. That goes back into destroying the fabric of the family.
There's something to add to that too. Not only fear of contracting sexually transmitted infections or diseases, but there's also issue of shame. There's also issue of guilt. So there's a psychological component to this that enters into the home and makes life together very difficult. And people also do not have access to a lot of the resources we have here, such as counseling. When an issue like this happens, that will help people work through the issue itself and try to stay together as a family. So in a mix of all the pressure and the stress that comes with the rape, people split.
Forgive me if you don't, if this isn't an area that either of you have studied, but one of the things on the pink call to action sheet is to befriend a refugee family. Can you talk a little bit about what the experiences are for people who are trying to leave the Congo to maybe come to the United States? How difficult is that process? How can people help in that particular way? I don't know if you can speak to that, or if you know anything about that.
Yeah, we can speak to that. In fact, that's a very good call, Professor Mike. We'll begin with GRCC. The time we share the courses here, there are several refugee students who are part of the GRCC family. So I would say to the student or an audience today, one of the very gentle and kind things you can do is to befriend one of those students who are other than you, who's different than you, coming from a different country. And since we're speaking about Congo today, I know several who are currently taking courses here. Become their friend, just help them to acclimate to life in America will be a great thing to do as our neighbor's keeper. Now, speaking on the issue of when people come, how we can engage in that and help, there are several agencies in town that do the work of resettlement. If I can name some of them, will be Lutheran Social Services, Catholic Social Services, and Bethany Christian Services. Those three agencies are doing work of resettlement. Now, the way people come is by first being interviewed by the International Organization for Migration, which is a branch of the United Nations, and then our State Department, working in collaboration with the United Nations, determines how many people the United States can actually welcome on its shore among these refugees. Canada will do the same, Australia will do the same, and some of the European countries do the same. Those who come to the United States are then channeled through these social service agencies. So how can we engage in that right now, right here in Grand Rapids? It's basically a phone call or a Google hit to try to unearth one of these agencies and find out how you can do that. I received an email last week soliciting my community, that is my church, to help Bethany Christian Services work with 100 young Somalians who are actually coming to the United States, who have gone through this process of being interviewed and assigned as refugees to the United States. And some of these will be students at GRCC, if I'm not mistaken, once they reach our shores.
And Professor Mike, if I can just add, in interviewing some of the Congolese friends that I've come across, they can, which this was really surprising to me, they can spend 10 to 12 years waiting in a refugee camp. And these camps are not a very pleasant place. You saw some of Kizombo's photos. But this one camp that they were describing, this one couple was describing to me, there were 70,000 people in this camp, and it's surrounded by barbed wire, and they cannot leave. They are in this camp. And it was a very traumatic experience. As I was trying to listen to them and watch them tell this story, I could see they were both so traumatized by just the fear and the difficult situations, the suffering that they had within this camp. And someone asked, the question about color. Even though they may all be dark-skinned, there is still ethnic hatred that is within these camps. And so now they are in this camp of barbed wire, and they have no place to flee to. So it's a very difficult experience. It's a very long wait.
Are there classes that are available at CC to become like a helper or worker? Can you hear me? Okay.
One more time.
Are there classes that are available for the students to become like a worker to help?
Yes, there are trainings that these agencies hold for foster families or for people that want to become a mentor or a friend to one of the refugee families. And some of those classes also could be the classes that you are taking currently here at GRCC, some of the social work classes, or one of the courses that one of my colleagues was teaching is not coming to mind right now, but social work classes would also help you to know how to relate to other people. But specifically for the refugees, these agencies do orientations for people that desire to become either a mentor or a foster parent, and the things of that nature. I saw a hand somewhere here. Right here.
Yeah, I have one. All right, you said you moved here in '89, and the Civil War started in '96. Do you still have family over there?
Yes.
That you communicate with?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I was wondering how long it took for you to find out about it, if it wasn't really, widespread on the mainstream news.
That's a good question. When all the war came through into Congo, my parents had been back to Congo. In '87, my whole family moved to the United States. And in 92, I should say, my parents went back to Congo. And when the war came through, it was a very traumatic time because we did not know whether they were alive or dead. And it took a very long time until my father was able to get out of the country to be able to communicate with us to let us know that, yes, they are alive. And today they are alive. They are in Congo. So when I go with the teams, we get a chance to see them and sometimes work with them.
Another refugee family that I met, they've been here a while, but when the husband, because of the volatility of the region, they travel separately. They don't travel together because they have 3 sons here. And so they just explained to me either the husband goes and comes back or the wife goes and comes back, but they don't travel together.
Pamela, can you tell us about some of your art? Like, how long does it take you to do? Is it it's a watercolor? Mm-hmm. Something like this. These are all really beautiful. How long does it take to do that?
Yeah, thank you. Well, the original paintings are very large, and watercolor is painted on paper. And usually watercolor artists paint on small paper, but I paint on very large paper. And it may take 20 hours, 40 hours, depending on the detail. And then these have been reproduced on canvas to wrap around these pillars, because I decided I wanted to use pillars to represent these women that I was meeting these women, I was seeing their courage, I was seeing this fire in their hearts, and I was seeing this strength. And so I wanted to use pillars to represent each of the women. And then all the titles are carefully chosen. Like if I see valor, I see this attribute in them, or strength, or dignity. And so right now I have, I think, up to 16 paintings. I'm still working on this series. I'd like to do 25 paintings. I'm still interviewing for stories. I think at this point I have 15 stories. So it's just a work in progress. I've been working on it since 2011. And the flame tree here, my friends were all donating frames to me, and then I built this fire in my backyard in a fire pit, and I was putting these frames in the fire just to represent the suffering and the trauma that I saw in these people and the losses that they've experienced. And then I took some of the frames to my brother's house, and he shot bullet holes through some of these frames, just again to picture this story of what these people have experienced. So this is my 3D family tree, and I wish I had 8 million frames to make it really realistic. But they wouldn't fit in this room. So, and then I wanted these little survivors coming up, because it's not just the loss, and it doesn't just end there, because I see this rebirth and new life that keeps just regenerating as the next generations are being born and they're just growing up, and I just see the strength of these people. So again, they're portrayed by pillars. So, thank you.
How often do you go there?
I didn't catch it.
We did not hear your question. Can you repeat it, please?
How often do you go there?
Currently, I'm going every summer. I'm going the month of July. And the purpose for that is because some friends who are engaging with us here, and some of them are educators. During the summer months, they are off from their current activities, and then they go with me, and we stay for a time of 3 weeks, give or take, do multiple activities, and then we come back.
Is there like a, how can I say this? Like some type of sign up, or like, yeah, like a study group and like come join, or?
Yes, if you are interested in learning a little bit more about what we are doing this summer, in the month of July, I have some cards in the back. You can take a card. We connect outside of this time. Professor Mike has several handouts that will be given to us as we leave, and we can connect, and then we can inform you of how we prepare for the trip and some of the things we have lined up to do. Pamela mentioned one of the goals we have. This particular area where we are working, they do not have safe drinking water. So we desire this summer to build some wells if we put together all the resources we need to do that. So let's talk after this time, and we'll inform you on what we need to do to prepare.
Back to the front. You guys are wearing me out.
I really didn't have a question. I just had a comment, really. I was listening to what you were saying about the women being raped and how the family is being torn apart. And it just reminds me of what happened like back in the day, you know, and it seems like history repeating itself in that way. And it kind of makes me wonder, like, who's really behind what's going on? And then you're saying that the whole object of the situation is greed, you know, who can capitalize and monopolize on this and that. And I guess that's what really concerns me, is wondering who's really pulling the strings, you know, who's behind the situation.
It sounds like slavery. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
All right, I have a question for Pamela. The portraits, the paintings on the pillars, are these actual people that you've met whose stories you've heard?
Yes, these are actual people that I have met and I have befriended, and they have befriended me. And so that's how I was telling Professor Mike, my heart has grown larger because of these new friendships. Because of the sensitivity of some of these stories, that I may have certain adults that are willing to have their painting portrayed with a story, but it may not necessarily be their story. So I might have one story on a pillar and an image on this pillar, and I just mix stories so that nobody can be identified. And the children, I don't portray their stories just because they're still children, but they're just in the larger story of this Congolese story.
Yes, this is just a comment on what you said. All the suffering and torture that they go through, they still sing.
Yeah.
And I thought that was just touching and beautiful.
It is touching, and it's, you know, I was going to drag my high school boys to this time where they were all singing and having a time of one of their church services, and my boys didn't really want to go. And I was like, no, you have to go. This is one of our family field trips. You're going to go. And so I kind of had to drag my husband too, to be honest. But when they got there, they were just so amazed and drawn into this service. I mean, it was in Swahili, so none of us, we couldn't understand it. My husband, myself, my children. And yet we could just see the spirit of these people, our Congolese friends. And when we got in the car afterwards, my husband and my sons, these are high school boys, they were saying, that was just the greatest thing, one of the greatest services we've ever been to. And their hearts were so touched. And I was just so glad that my boys could experience this, to see people of another culture and experience that culture, yet here, right here in West Michigan. So I'd encourage you to get involved with any of the Congolese refugees here in West Michigan, and they would welcome you into their lives. They've welcomed me into their lives. They keep telling me I'm Congolese. I'm trying to be.
Pamela, going back to your painting, I just like the backgrounds are like really beautiful. Like, is those actually like they were standing in front of those backgrounds, or did you just like kind of like imagine it?
I can't tell who's asking the question. Okay, yeah, because I want to look at you. Thank you. Well, it's interesting because with this women, the mother and child here, I needed a background. I was struggling, like, do I use graffiti? And one of my friends was like, no, that's too American. I was like, okay. But then I was driving down 131 and I saw those trains there by Hall or, that area. And I just like swerved over onto the shoulder. I mean, you would not want to be driving near me, because when I get an artistic idea, you do not want to be near me because it's not safe. So I pull alongside the road and I get out of my car, and I did lock it because I was thinking, well, what if someone bad comes here? And it was daylight, but I started taking pictures over that fence, and those trains were a ways beyond that. And that day, there was this blue train, and it was just perfect, because when I was watching these documentaries, I could see that the Congolese people love blue, and it's just the right color blue. And I've been looking as I go by other days now, and there's never a blue train anymore, so it was just this perfect day. On these other pillars, well, this first one, no, the woman was not standing in this grassy field with that dark forest behind her, but it portrayed this story where she and her husband were working out in the field, and this small group of militia soldiers came and they gang raped her and killed her husband. And I just felt that, evening is setting in that painting, and just the tall grasses, and yet you have this woman standing straight and strong. She's rising up after this trauma, and she's rebuilding her life. And that's what I see in these women. So I try to portray what I see. The sheets with the second pillar there in the middle, sometimes it's very hard for them to tell me their stories. It's painful. It's painful to listen. It's painful to tell the story. And in that case, it's like the sheets opened and the story was told, and then the sheets closed, and there was no more asking about that story. It was done. So I just try to portray what I see, what I experience when I'm with them. Oh, I'm sorry. I just want to comment on that last pillar, because it's such a dear woman, and the last pillar, the story is the family was in their home in Congo, and the soldiers came, and it's just like in a moment, and they killed her husband, and she scooped up her baby and ran one way, and her little girl in all the chaos ran the other way, and she never saw her again, the other little girl. So on that pillar, that last pillar, I have the mother in the front, and if you walk around the pillar, on the back side is the child, the missing child. So, hard stories.
Any other questions? Shall we transition to the last part?
Good evening. We are Clay. We're also from Congo. We are a family of a few others who are not here today. But I am Grace. This is Judith, Anne, Gigi, Rebecca, and Samson. And we're going to be singing a few songs in a few of our Congolese dialects, mostly Swahili, Lingala, and a bit of French. Yes. So we hope you enjoy this. Thank you.
Ayo, 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 haye, uweo, 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 uweo.
The next song we're going to be singing is going to be in Lingala, and it talks about Naaman, who was a military official in the Bible. It's a story in the Bible, and he suffered from an illness that he wanted to get rid of, and he went to the prophet Eli, who told him to go to the Jordan River and immerse himself 7 times. And this is just a story about immersing himself, the soldier immersing himself the first time, the second time, the third time, looking at himself and goes, I still look the same, and then he goes again until the 7th time when he's healed and he declares that there is no other God than the God of the prophet Eli. Thank you.
Namana mokonzi na piko ya basolda azalaki na malada yambala Elia mosali na nzambe abengisaki ye po abika akende kosokola na mai alade na mbala sambo Elia mosali na nzambe abengisaki ye po abika akende kosokola na mai alade na mbala sambo una mbala ya liboso ya mibale ya misato nzoto nanga ezali sendenge moko una mbala ya midei nakati ya mai ya mitano nzoto nanga ezali sendenge moko una mbala ya motoba nakati ya mai oya sambo aleluya nabiki sasepi na yebi etenzambe mosusu azalite katina mokili yoyo sasepi na yebi ete nzambe mosusu azalite kati na mokili oyo. Hallelujah, hallelujah, whoa, whoa, hallelujah, hallelujah, whoa, whoa, hallelujah, 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 whoa, whoa, hallelujah, hallelujah, whoa, whoa, hallelujah.
The next song we're going to be singing is in Swahili. It talks about the blessing of God. It says, Baraka ya Mungu ni ajabu. It's God's blessing is truly amazing. It goes all the way. It goes up, it goes down, it goes sides, everywhere.
Baraka za Mungu kweli ni za ajabu. Baraka za Mungu kweli ni za ajabu. Zaweza kwenda juu, zaweza kwenda chini, zaweza kwenda mbele, zaweza kwenda nyuma, upande upande kwa mataifa yote, upande upande kwa mataifa yote. Furaha ya Bwana kweli ni ajabu. Furaha ya Bwana kweli ni ajabu. Yaweza kwenda juu, yaweza kwenda chini, yaweza kwenda mbele, yaweza kwenda nyuma, upande upande kwa mataifa yote, upande upande kwa mataifa yote. Furaha ya Bwana kweli ni ajabu. Furaha ya Bwana kweli ni ajabu. Yaweza kwenda juu, yaweza kwenda chini, yaweza kwenda mbele, yaweza kwenda nyuma, upande upande kwa mataifa yote, upande upande kwa mataifa yote.
Two more last songs. This song is in Lingala. It's a song that was brought to us, that was taught to us by Rebecca, and she insisted that we sing it. It's about how we as Christians, we should treat each other well. We should be good to each other, be good to our spouses, be good to our neighbors. And it's in Lingala. Enjoy.
Bino bakambi boyoka toye bisa bino maloba oyo Paulo watikaki pona bino bakengeli. Bino bakambi boyoka toye bisa bino maloba oyo Paulo watikaki pona bino bakengeli.
Mokengeli na bandimi yebongi azala,
azala moto na lolendo te.
Mokengeli na bandimi yebongi azale,
azala moto na lolendo te. Azala mobele na kondima makasi, azala mobele na mwasina ye moko, banana yeba yeba nzambe. Azala moengeni na bapa ya mokengeli ye nanda kwa nzambe. Azala moto na lolendo te, moto na kosilika no kite.
Mokengeli na bandimi yebongi azala,
azala moto na lolendo te.
Mokengeli na bandimi yebongi azale,
azala moto na lolendo te. Azala bobele na kondima makasi, azala bobele na mwasina ye moko, banana yeba yeba nzambe. Azala mwengeni na bapa ya mokengeli ye nanda kwa nzambe. Azala moto na lolendo te, moto na kosilika no kite.
Mokengeli na bandimi yebongi azala,
azala moto na lolendo te.
Mokengeli na bandimi yebongi azala,
azala moto na lolendo te. Azala mobele na kondima makasi, azala mobele na mwasina ye moko, banana yeba yeba nzambe. Azala mwengeni na bapa ya mokengeli ye nanda kwa nzambe. Azala moto na lolendo te, moto na kosilika no kite.
Thank you. That felt like a marathon. The last song is a French song that says, it's like a prayer, and it's also like a lullaby that most parents sing to their children. It says, in my country, Congo, my mom is there, my dad is there. And we've changed the lyrics a bit to include some of the struggles that Pastor Kizombo and Pamela have talked about the rape and the man being killed, and some children who are recruited to be soldiers at a young age. So, thank you.
Dans mon pays du Congo, pays où je suis né, là où j'ai grandi. Dans mon pays du Congo, maman est là, papa est là. Ah oui, 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 nous sommes les Congolais. Ah oui, 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 nous sommes les Congolais. Dans mon pays des Congo, les femmes violées, les hommes tués. Dans mon pays des Congo, les enfants soldats, les autres sont morts. Ah oui, 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 nous servons le Congo. Ah oui, 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 nous plairons le Congo. Si vous voulez, mes amis, aider Congo, priez pour eux. Si vous voulez, mes amis, aider Congo, priez pour lui. Ah oui, 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 nous prions pour Congo. Ah oui, 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 nous prions pour Congo.